I had been looking after the company's CEO, Sophie, for 2 years after her accident left her unable to move. When she finally recovered, the very first thing she did was propose to the man she loved, the one who had actually left her when she needed him most. The news reports called them an inseparable pair, finally making it official. I stood in the city square, looking up at the giant screen that was live streaming the proposal. I watched quietly for a moment, then took the small ring I had in my pocket and dropped it into a nearby trash can. With that, I felt like the debt I owed her family was finally settled. Many people on the busy street had stopped what they were doing, their eyes also fixed on the outdoor screens showing the proposal. It wasn't just this square. Every large screen available in City A was broadcasting the same event. The picture quality was so good you could almost count Sophie's eyelashes. The whole setup of the proposal had Sophie's style written all over it. She had spent months during her recovery sketching out every detail, even the designs for the fireworks. I remembered back then. She would hold my hand, her fingers cold, and ask me what kind of flowers I liked. I told her I preferred hyacinths. But looking at the screen now, the entire proposal scene was filled with a vast display of bright red roses, and the man at the center of it all wasn't me. It was Sophie's ex-boyfriend, Mark, a well-known designer. I watched calmly as the proposal on the screen reached the point where Sophie held out her hand, waiting for Mark to place the ring on her finger. The diamond ring in the black velvet box shone brightly, like a distant star. Compared to that, the ring I had just thrown away barely even looked like a ring. Some young men standing near me started cheering excitedly. One of them said, "Go, Sophie! Her long hair looks amazing. No wonder they used to call her the most sought-after woman in the city." Another added, "Mark gave up everything to be with her and take care of her while she couldn't move. That's true love, a real fairy tale. They're meant to be together." I silently rubbed my wrist, where faint scars still remained from the time I spent caring for Sophie. The truth was, back when Sophie was first injured, Mark had broken up with her and moved to Milan to continue his studies. The crowd around me seemed to hold its breath as the proposal reached its most important moment. Mark lowered his head, looked into Sophie's eyes, and said, "I do." The ring slid onto her finger, and Sophie stood on her toes to kiss him. At that exact moment, fireworks lit up the sky all over City A. With a display that big, it wasn't just City A. Probably the whole country knew about their engagement. That was just like Sophie. When she liked someone, she wanted the entire world to know about it. The crowd buzzed with excitement. The man next to me, still caught up in the moment, grabbed my arm and said enthusiastically, "They look so good together, don't you think?" I managed a small smile, enduring the slight pain as he gripped my wrist and said, "Yeah, they match." He noticed I looked a bit pale and quickly let go of my arm, about to apologize, but I had already turned and started walking away. Behind me, the proposal on the big screen continued with the main characters sharing an emotional kiss, and the crowd roared with cheers for their love story as more fireworks exploded overhead. I walked a little further and then stopped next to a trash can, bending down for a moment to steady myself. Then, I stood up, took out the plain, dull-looking ring from my pocket again. It wasn't a particularly nice ring, and it didn't even fit very well. Luckily, I didn't need to keep it anymore. I tossed it into the trash can. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, more than I had felt in a long time. From this point on, my debt to her family, and to Sophie, was completely repaid. Soon after, I was let go from the corporation. I used to have my own office, but by the end, I didn't even have a desk. A colleague, Sarah, handed me a box with my personal things. We got along well, so she leaned in and whispered, "Sophie personally asked for you to be let go, Liam. You'll get severance pay. Just take it and go. She was trying to be somewhat decent about it. I understood. Sophie's actual words were probably more like, "Tell him to get lost," likely said while she was relaxing in her chair, not caring at all. Struggling a bit with the box, I walked past what used to be my office. I saw that it had a new occupant. It was now Mark's lounge. The room was filled with design sketches, and pictures of him and Sophie together were displayed where my detailed work schedule used to be. I looked down, my fingers gripping the box so tightly my knuckles turned white for a second, but then I relaxed my grip. It didn't matter anymore. As I reached the company's entrance, I got pushed and stumbled, and the box fell, scattering my belongings on the ground. A large crowd of people had gathered there, mostly reporters and onlookers. Someone accidentally stepped on my hand. A sharp pain shot through it. The crowd was surging in one direction. I endured the pain and looked up to see Mark escorting Sophie out of the building. Mark, who always favored red, had his hair styled perfectly, but Sophie, walking beside him, looked even more striking. Sophie never really liked crowds and seemed a bit annoyed, but she still carefully shielded Mark from being jostled. Reporters quickly surrounded Mark, shoving microphones in his face and firing off questions. "Mark, the proposal of the century has been the top trending topic online for a week. As the man of the hour, what do you have to say?" Mark smiled and replied, "I feel very lucky. During her 2 years of hardship, I was always the one by her side." Sophie's life had generally been smooth sailing. She was always successful. The only difficult period was the 2 years after her car accident when she was paralyzed. During that time, she experienced a lot of setbacks and saw how quickly people could turn their backs on you. No one, it seemed, had more right than Mark to make that statement about being by her side. Except, back then, he had actually left for another country, leaving only me to care for Sophie. It was such an obvious lie, yet Sophie looked pleased and didn't correct him, even seeming to encourage his words. Sophie lowered her eyes and looked at Mark with a tenderness that was almost surprising, like a wildfire that had finally been calmed by a river. Camera flashes went off constantly, capturing the image of the two of them looking lovingly into each other's eyes for the news. Suddenly, Sophie turned her head, and her eyes met mine through the crowd. Her gaze was intensely cold. I met her look quietly and offered a small, soft smile, feeling a sense of relief. She frowned, a subconscious reaction. Actually, I thought to myself, I was lucky too. For those 2 difficult years of her life, I was the one there by her side, and now all my debts of gratitude were finally settled. The taxi I called was taking a long time to arrive. I felt a bit dizzy and my stomach ached. I crouched by the roadside, holding my stomach. The hand that had been stepped on was swollen and bleeding, throbbing with pain. Mark really was someone special to Sophie, I mused. I had known Sophie for many years. She was always popular, a young lady with a long line of admirers, but the only boyfriend she had ever publicly acknowledged was Mark. It was like a broken mirror being made whole again. It made a certain kind of sense. Suddenly, I heard a car horn honk. I instinctively looked up. A black car had stopped right in front of me. The window rolled down, and there was Sophie, looking at me with her usual indifferent expression, tapping her knuckles on the steering wheel. "Stomachache again?" she asked. I blinked, a little surprised. She scoffed, her eyes filled with sarcasm and disdain. "Serves you right." I lowered my eyes. It felt like I had stepped back 2 years in time, to when her attitude towards me was just as harsh. She used to say that for someone like me, just being alive was a blessing. I only now realized that any affection she had shown me later on was probably just an act. She had likely been afraid that if I left, there would be no one to take care of her. So I ignored her comment. I heard footsteps behind me. Mark walked around the car and got into the passenger seat. "Sophie, sorry I'm late," he said. "Those journalists were relentless. I should have come with you to help keep them away." While fastening his seatbelt, Mark turned and saw me. His voice faltered, and he looked a bit pale. In a hurry, he urged Sophie, "Let's go. We're going to be late for the party." Sophie frowned slightly, almost as if by reflex. I endured the pain in my hand and stomach and looked up at Sophie, guessing this might be the last time we would ever speak. "I saw your engagement live stream," I said. "The actual event looked even better than the sketches you drew. Except there were no hyacinths. Everything else was perfect." I added, "Congratulations to both of you. I wish you happiness forever." Sophie's faint smile vanished. Her hand, resting on the car window, tightened, as if she had heard anything but a blessing. I looked down, missing the expression that crossed her face. Mark remained silent for a moment, then softly said, "Sophie, time's running out. Don't waste it on irrelevant people." From above, I heard Sophie's flat voice. "Liam, you'll regret this." She waited a moment, but I didn't reply. She let out a small, humorless laugh, restarted the engine, and drove off. I looked up, a bit dazed, only seeing the back of her black car disappearing down the street. It kind of reminded me of how she used to speed in her sports car. Even if it was a well-intentioned wish coming from me, Sophie would inexplicably get angry. She definitely had her issues, but I knew I wouldn't regret my decision. I waited for what felt like forever, but no taxi came. I had almost given up hope when my phone suddenly buzzed. A message popped up, short and to the point. "Where are you?" I hesitated for a moment, then sent my location. Half an hour later, I was sitting in a comfortable business car, awkwardly extending my injured hand. The woman in front of me, Chloe, lowered her eyes and began to clean and dress the wound. Chloe looked up. "Does it hurt?" she asked. I stiffened nervously and shook my head. Chloe bent down and gently blew on my hand. The cool air made me flinch slightly. "I said it doesn't hurt," I insisted. Only then did she release my hand, muttering, "I couldn't hear you just now." I felt a bit like a traitor. As Sophie's longtime assistant, I knew Sophie and Chloe had always been rivals. From their school days right through to their business careers, they were arch enemies. Especially during those 2 years when Sophie was paralyzed, Chloe had come very close to taking over Sophie's company. Even though Sophie and I had no ties anymore, it was still a strange feeling to adjust to. Chloe leaned back in her seat. "There's a dinner party tonight," she said. "I need a date." I lowered my head, noticing that the wound on my hand was already neatly bandaged. "Sophie will be there, right?" I asked. Chloe replied with a simple, "Mm-hmm," and sighed. I avoided her gaze, then eventually spoke. "If you're hoping to use me to upset Sophie, you'll probably be disappointed. She doesn't care about me." My voice was soft, as I stated what I believed to be the calm truth. Chloe fidgeted with a lighter, a small flame briefly illuminating her fingers. She said, "Don't be so sure." I turned and stared out at the scenery zipping past the car window, letting out a small laugh. It reminded me of Sophie when she was 17. She had laughed openly and mockingly in front of all her friends, saying, "Liam? I could never like Liam." When it was time for me to get a new hairstyle and try on suits for the party, Chloe stayed with me. She was very particular, rejecting several expensive high-end options. Honestly, I didn't really want to attend that party, but Chloe insisted, so what could I do? Half a month ago, when I left Sophie's house, I had left almost everything behind. Chloe's grandmother had kindly taken me in temporarily, so whatever Chloe wanted, I tried my best to accommodate. While I was trying on a silver-white suit, the hem of which shimmered subtly, Chloe's gaze settled on me. She finally nodded. "This one it is." I glanced at the mirror beside me and fell silent, surprised at my own reflection. The person looking back was both unfamiliar and familiar, surprisingly handsome. The quiet boy who once stood silently in Sophie's shadow, so often unnoticed, suddenly stood out. I'd never seen myself like this before. I reached out carefully and touched the cold surface of the mirror. Chloe stood behind me, holding a brooch between her fingertips. Tilting her head slightly, she pinned it to my suit. Her breath was warm, and her voice was gentle when she spoke. "Liam, we're not going there to spite them. I just want to make Sophie see that she's not just been paralyzed. She's been blind, too." This was my first time attending such a formal business event. Despite being by Sophie's side all those years, I was never her official partner for these kinds of functions. Chloe and I arrived fashionably late. Right before we entered the ballroom, I looked up at Chloe. The lighting from inside momentarily highlighted her profile, and it was a bit dazzling. Whispers arose around us as we walked in. Only then did I snap back to reality. "Who's that man with Chloe?" someone murmured. "They look great together." Isn't Chloe always dateless at these things? Nearby, someone who knew Sophie well took a long look at me, then uttered in surprised, "Damn, isn't that Sophie's plain old assistant?" Just as that was said, I heard the sound of a glass shattering. I glanced towards the noise. There stood Sophie, a broken wine glass at her feet. Red wine had splashed onto Mark's trouser legs. He frowned, but Sophie seemed unfazed, staring straight at me steadily. She had never seen me dressed like this or in this kind of company. Seeing me now, she looked stunned. Even Mark, when he looked up, took a moment to recognize me, appearing utterly shocked. I nodded politely in their direction, then continued accompanying Chloe as she mingled with other guests. Sophie finally seemed to notice the woman next to me. Her expression shifted from surprise to an icy glare as she strode over and tried to pull me away. Chloe was quick to react. She reached out and blocked Sophie, then looped her arm through mine, pulling me closer to her side. Standing behind Chloe, Sophie looked past her directly at me. "Liam, come here." I had never taken anyone else's side over Sophie's before, let alone hidden behind someone else. Whenever she called my name, no matter how far away I was, I would always run to her. But now, it was different. I didn't step back. In a calm, quiet voice, just like every other time I'd spoken to her, I said, "I've done enough over the years." A warm midsummer breeze blew in through an open window. "Sophie, we're done." Her face went pale instantly. Midsummer is often a time for significant meetings. I was a child whose education and well-being were supported by Sophie's family. It wasn't just me. Our entire county had received help from Sophie's mother since a major earthquake years ago. But my first time actually going to Sophie's house was when I was 15. I was the top student in our county that year, and I joined some of the adults from our town in bringing local specialties to thank Sophie's mother. Sophie's mother was as gentle and kind as I had imagined. She chatted with the adults about their plans for the next year and took countless phone calls, looking very busy. I stood off to the side, and my eyes fell upon a photo on her desk. The girl in the photo looked about my age, with delicate features and an impatient look directed at the camera. She seemed like a princess. The butler suddenly knocked on the door, looking a bit troubled. "Ma'am, the young miss is out riding her motorcycle again." Sophie's mother, looking tired, just nodded dismissively. "Go and get her back." The butler looked conflicted. It seemed like a difficult task. One of the adults from my town next to me nudged me forward, chuckling awkwardly. "Let Liam go with the butler. He gets on well with kids his age." Sophie's mother's gaze finally settled on me. I curled my fingers, gathered my courage, and nodded. "I can do it," Even if I wasn't sure I could, I knew I had to try. I followed the butler to the mountain road where Sophie was riding. She was 17 then, already poised and graceful on a black and red motorcycle. She only stopped when she nearly reached me. As she took off her helmet, her sharp eyes looked me over with a lazy, languid air. "You country bumpkin," she said. "Who are you?" I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling pale. I almost thought she was going to run me over. After a moment, I managed to speak. "I'm Liam." She seemed amused. My second sentence was, "Sophie's mom wants me to take you back?" Her face immediately turned cold. Sophie wasn't the obedient type, but I was stubborn too. If she wouldn't go, I wouldn't leave either. I waited by the side of the road. She would ride past once and find me still there. After her second pass, I was still there. By the third lap, perhaps feeling a bit embarrassed or annoyed, she stopped and reluctantly took me back with her, with me following. I walked behind her, feeling how distant and aloof she was. The midsummer evening breeze blew gently. I remembered her name was Sophie. Sophie's mother wanted someone to keep an eye on Sophie, to watch over her, so I stayed and became Sophie's little sidekick, helping to make sure she didn't get into too much trouble. Sophie was a rebellious teenager and especially disliked me, seeing me as her mom's spy. She always picked on me, but I would just wipe my tears and keep following her. Eventually, she gave up on trying to get rid of me. As Sophie put it, I was annoying as hell. Everyone knew that although Sophie had countless fleeting romances and friendships, she always had this plain, barely noticeable kid by her side, who would only step in to stop her from going too far. I worked hard at school, tried to meet Sophie's mother's expectations, and stuck by Sophie's side. 7 or 8 years passed like this, all while I kept a secret to myself. The year I finished high school, I was standing under the jacaranda tree in their yard. Sophie leaned against the yard's fence. Her words were casual, yet they felt like they squeezed my heart and exposed my deepest secret. She asked, "You like me, don't you, Liam?" I froze, unable to move for a long time. Jacaranda petals fell around me, and it took what felt like ages before I heard my own hoarse voice reply, "Yes, I like you." Sophie just chuckled and walked away. That night, I went to find Sophie. As I pushed open her room's door, I heard Sophie laughing, sprawled indulgently on her sofa. Her voice wasn't particularly loud, but it felt deafening. It wasn't just my ears. My whole being ached. "Who would like Liam?" she said. "I like Mark's type." That was the first time I heard Mark's name. I was 2 years younger than Sophie, but had skipped a grade in high school to try and catch up to her at university. But at that moment, I realized there are some things you just can't catch up to, no matter how hard you try. The 15-year-old Liam who first met Sophie would have never guessed that years later, we'd still be on such strained terms, to the point of causing a scene at someone else's party. Especially now, at Sophie's first major social event after her recovery. She and Chloe already had a difficult relationship, and everyone was keeping an eye on them since they arrived. As we faced off, people were watching. Some openly, some secretly. I tugged at Chloe's sleeve. "Let's go." Sophie's eyelids fluttered, and I avoided her gaze. For the first time in years, she heard me say, "Let's go," to someone else while she was right there. We walked quite a distance before I glanced back. Sophie was still standing there, her head down. It reminded me of when she first woke up after the car accident 2 years ago. Fragile, cold, and distant. Sophie's mother had already passed away by then. Mark had wanted to reach out to her, but he was frozen by one look from her. I smiled a little at the memory. Chloe raised an eyebrow. "What's so funny?" I murmured, just realizing that not everyone can do it. Not everyone can handle Sophie's mood swings and her princess-like behavior. Not everyone, after seeing her difficult side, would still choose to stick around. Especially during the time when she was paralyzed. Sophie, who was always the golden child, just couldn't accept that she had become disabled. She stopped smiling and lost all her usual spirit. Plus, the fact that the only family she had left, Sophie's mom, had died in that same car crash didn't help her state of mind. Back then, Sophie had no will to live and attempted to end her life multiple times. I remember one time I smashed a glass, picked up a shard, and slashed it across my own wrist. "If you want to die, that's fine," I told her, my voice shaking but firm. "I'll go with you." Sophie had never seen me so intense. Her dark eyes stared at me for a long, long time. Almost through gritted teeth, she promised, "Liam, I'll get better." After that, she started cooperating with the doctors. 2 years later, she finally stood up on her own again. Then, she ditched her wheelchair for good. After the banquet, I headed back to Chloe's place with her. I had been staying with Chloe's grandmother, who had been kind enough to let me live there. I was actively working on my resume, and once I found a job, I planned to move out. Honestly, Chloe and I weren't that close. The only times we used to interact were when Sophie got into fights with her. I would then have to go and apologize to Chloe on Sophie's behalf. Chloe's grandmother always welcomed me warmly, waving her fan. She'd say, "Oh, it's no big deal. Kids fight. Have a seat, young man." I'd often end up sitting there for the whole afternoon, awkwardly watching as Chloe's grandmother applied herbal ointment to Chloe's minor injuries from whatever spat she'd had with Sophie. The afternoon sun would stream through the window, filling the room with a warm light, and it always made me feel a little guilty. Who would have thought that now, during my own hard times, it would be Chloe's family that was helping me out? Chloe and I weren't really big talkers, so the car ride was quiet. I sat there stiffly, like a schoolboy, my eyes straight ahead. When I glanced up, I caught a glimpse of Chloe in the rearview mirror. She seemed pretty tired. Her long eyelashes stood out as her eyes were closed. The city lights flickered across her face. Chloe opened her eyes and noticed me looking at her reflection. I quickly looked away, feeling a little awkward, but not overly so. Chloe suddenly laughed and asked, "Liam, do you remember what I thought when I first saw you?" How could I forget? She had said it right in front of Sophie. Nodding, I replied, "You asked if I was blind, or why else I'd be following Sophie around." Sophie had been so mad then. They ended up fighting again because of it. Chloe shook her head, closing her eyes again. Outside, the city was bustling with life. Inside the car, it was quiet for so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then I heard her say softly, I thought, "Why is he so well behaved?" It had been a while since I last visited Sophie's mom. I took a bunch of white flowers to the cemetery to see her. Shortly after Sophie had taken over the company, a runaway truck had crashed into their car. One died. One was seriously injured. She was a kind woman. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't know where I'd be today. I cleared the weeds near her grave and chatted with her for a while, slowly. "Sophie's mom," I said. "The charity work you cared so much about is still going strong. It's growing bigger every year. The foundation gets so many thank you letters that a single room can't even hold them all." I glanced at the flower in my hand. A droplet of dew was about to fall from a petal. Sophie's healed now, no different from before. The company's back on track. She recently got engaged, and the media has made a big deal out of it, calling it a once-in-a-lifetime ceremony. The guy is Mark, someone Sophie brought home a while ago. They're doing great. Everything is moving in a good direction, except for me. All these years, I feel like I'm still stuck in the same place with no real direction. The smiling woman in the photo on the gravestone seemed to listen silently. I touched the photo. I resigned. Would you blame me? Of course, there was no answer. The cemetery was quiet. Death doesn't make a sound. Except for those early days, I continued. Honestly, I haven't been very happy here. Sometimes I think if I hadn't placed first in that exam back then, things might be different now. I zoned out for a bit, staring at the headstone, before packing up my things to leave. As I stood up, I noticed someone standing not too far off. I wasn't sure how long they'd been there. I lowered my gaze. There was only one exit, so I had to walk towards Sophie. She was probably visiting her mom, too, coincidentally. As I brushed past her, Sophie spoke. Being sad in front of my mom, you. But she didn't get to finish her sentence. I turned my head and looked at her. The sadness in my eyes flickered for a moment. Sophie swallowed the rest of her words. Our relationship wasn't usually this openly hostile. This kind of attitude from her had only happened twice before. Once was when I secretly sent out resumes because I was frustrated working as her assistant. She found out and was furious. The other time was recently, after she received that email and then kicked me out. One instance was before the accident, the other after, 2 years apart. But this time, I wasn't as upset as I used to be. I quietly looked at her and asked, speaking for the past version of myself, Sophie, just because I never showed it, did you really think I wouldn't be sad? Did you think that no matter what you did, I'd always just follow you around like when I was 15? Sophie pressed her lips together, her eyes dark. Her hand curled and uncurled a few times by her side, then tightened as she forced a mocking smile. She said, Liam, you still don't get it. You're the reason my mom died. So what are you pretending for? Even after I had walked away, I could still hear her last line directed at me. That accident wasn't just an accident. Guess who sold out my family? Later, I received an email. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was information Sophie's people had collected. It suggested that the car crash was no accident. Sophie's mother and she were on their way to sign a very important contract, and their travel plans were supposed to be absolutely private, known only to me, her most trusted assistant, someone who had practically grown up in her house. They had always trusted me completely. The email contained a photo, a grainy image showing me supposedly meeting with someone from a rival company. The timing was incredibly sensitive, right before the crash. But that picture was completely fake. I didn't even know the person in it. To Sophie, though, it looked like I was the only possible leak. She didn't even bother asking me about it before deciding I was guilty. I let out a bitter laugh, curling up in my chair. No wonder. No wonder she had me draw up detailed plans for a proposal one day, and then asked me to leave the very next. No wonder she'd rather run back to Mark than have anything to do with me. I closed the email, not even bothering to think about defending myself because I knew Sophie wouldn't listen. If she had just dug a little deeper, she would have found out that it wasn't only me who knew her whereabouts that day. There was also Mark. I hadn't slept that well in a long time. Before Sophie's accident, I was already discreetly looking for a new job. Mark was just too aggressive, and honestly, I was tired of the constant tension. He was Sophie's only truly serious boyfriend for years, and she had completely spoiled him. And he couldn't stand me. I had my share of minor troubles with her other male friends and acquaintances, but it was never this bad with anyone else. Can you imagine a man in his early 20s being publicly humiliated in front of the entire company? Mark did that to me. It happened during a week when Sophie was deeply involved in negotiating some sensitive contracts, and her mother's whereabouts were kept strictly secret. Even Mark didn't know where she was. He couldn't get in touch with Sophie, but I knew her location. He asked me, and I wouldn't tell him. I even stood in front of her office door to block him. Everyone knew he was Sophie's favorite, but I wasn't scared to stand up to him in that instance. so he called in nearly everyone from the company to watch, and then slapped me hard across the face. He said something like, "Liam, even if you were standing naked in front of Sophie, she wouldn't spare you a glance. Get out of my way. You think leeching off the Albright family will get you out of your poor background? Following Sophie around like you're not just some charity case." I hadn't done anything wrong, but standing there, it felt like I was stripped bare in front of everyone. He then barged into the office and saw Sophie's schedule. The very next day, Sophie and her mother had their accident. I never suspected Mark back then, because Sophie and her mother had been so good to him. Now, I understood. Only those who don't feel consistently loved are the ones who carefully note every kindness they receive, planning how to pay it back generously. That was me. I woke up, and it felt like everything had changed. The top trending topic on my newsfeed was about a conspiracy surrounding Sophie's car crash. In a city like ours, everyone loves a good scandal. With Sophie's big proposal making waves just before, an insider had leaked information suggesting her accident wasn't an accident at all, but a carefully planned attack by a rival business group. The leak blamed her assistant, me, who was supposedly that boy the Albright family supported for years. They even attached the photoshopped picture that had been in the email Sophie sent me. Mark responded to the news, appearing somewhat restrained, but with a gentle grin on camera. "Liam," he said, "I never really liked him, but he was always with Sophie. I even got mad at Sophie because of him before. I never thought he'd do something like this." The interview was long, basically painting me as a traitor, a typical ungrateful character from a drama. Sophie just stood there beside him, looking indifferent. I read the comments online. They raised that assistant for years, and he turned out to be a snake. Poor Mrs. Albright. Mark has been through hell having to deal with that jealous assistant. They need to report him, make sure he doesn't get away with this. Does anyone know where he is now? What company would even dare to hire him? I gotta say, Mark and Sophie must have had it tough to stay together through all this. True love, right? Someone suddenly took my phone. I looked up to see Chloe staring at my pale face. "Stop reading that," she said. "Grandma said dinner's ready." I opened my mouth to try and explain that it wasn't me, that I was innocent. Chloe didn't even pause. I know. It wasn't just words. She genuinely believed me. Just as everyone was saying online, the job interviewers I had previously gotten along with, well, now all declined to hire me. If I didn't clear my name, I'd probably be socially finished, unable to find work anywhere. That was the ending Sophie apparently wanted for me. A miserable life, revenge served cold. Only Chloe's company dared to even consider me. I had applied everywhere, even to the Albright Group's main rival, Chloe's company, but I had initially turned down their offer. While Chloe flipped through my resume at the time, without looking up, she had asked me why. I just shook my head. "My reputation is terrible right now," I'd said. "Any company I join would just get caught in the storm. It would be bad for you." Chloe tilted her head, studying me quietly for a moment, then smiled a bit wearily. "Liam, you're pretty oblivious." Oblivious about what? I was still trying to figure out what she meant when the police came and took me away. Chloe had reported the new information and the possibility of a conspiracy. Since I was connected to the case, or at least a potential suspect based on the evidence Sophie had, of course, I had to be questioned. Before going into the interrogation room, I saw Sophie and Mark. Their faces were a sight. Mark looked like a gambler who had gone all in, confident but tense. I kind of understood it, though. He'd probably cleaned up his tracks well enough over the years. Any real evidence was likely long gone. The only thing standing between him and Sophie now was me. Once I was locked up, he'd have nothing left to worry about. Not only would the world-ending proposal be real, but there'd also be some world-ending wedding soon after. He'd be the envy of everyone as Sophie's husband. Sophie's expression was a complex mix of emotions as she looked at me. I noticed her hands were fidgeting, trembling slightly. She glanced at me, then quickly turned away, her eyes looking red. I looked away too, and stepped into the interrogation room. In just a matter of hours, the police seemed to dig up everything about my entire life, laying it all out, clean and bare. Alongside the doctored photo, there was more circumstantial evidence stacked against me, all fitting together a little too conveniently, like a net designed to trap me. I was temporarily held in custody. It wasn't for long, just 10 days. The Albright family car crash case had a huge impact online, and in just a few days, conspiracy theories had spread like wildfire, impossible to suppress. The higher-ups in the police department took it very seriously, pooling significant resources to ensure justice was served and to avoid missing any clues. During those 10 days, I didn't really think about anything. I hadn't rested this well in a long time, sleeping heavily for days on end. On the 10th day, the truth finally came out, and I was released without any charges. This time, the wanted fugitive list didn't just include the Albright family's known criminal rivals. It also added another name. Mark. Justice may be slow sometimes, but it never fails. The police officially cleared my name. As I stepped out of the city police station, I barely had time to breathe in the fresh air before an avalanche of camera flashes blinded me. Reporters, who had clearly been waiting outside for a while, spotted their chance and shoved microphones in my face, bombarding me with questions. Liam, what do you think about Mark being the one who betrayed the group? Liam, all these years by Sophie's side, was it because you liked her? Liam, when Sophie was paralyzed, the one standing by her wasn't Mark. Who was taking care of her? Was it you? I was almost suffocating from the pressure, but thankfully a hand pulled me away. Chloe pushed a bouquet of flowers, meant for good luck, into my arms and carefully helped me into her car. As I got into the car, I looked back at the chaotic media frenzy, and I saw Sophie standing distantly, looking exhausted and fragile. I decided to answer the last question I'd heard from the media. I said softly, clearly enough for those nearby to hear, "No, it wasn't me by Sophie's side during that time. I gave up on her a long time ago." So much had happened online during those 10 days. I went from being showered with insults, with people wishing for my arrest or worse, to seeing the truth surface bit by bit. The first wave of change began when someone posted photos of Mark studying in Milan during the time of Sophie's paralysis, exposing the lie he had spun about caring for her. Everyone realized that when Sophie's accident happened, Mark had abandoned her to fly to Milan. He had enjoyed a peaceful time while she struggled to survive and recover. Their supposed love story, which so many people had believed in, especially the part about sticking together during tough times, turned into a scandalous tale of deceit. The public was disgusted. The second wave started when someone uploaded a video online showing Mark slapping me in the company building. The video was clear, showing how I was humiliated, holding my swollen face while standing in front of Sophie's office, only to be shoved to the ground by him. Mark, who was always perceived as gentle and charming, looked wild and even sinister in the video. His carefully crafted image as an outstanding professional and a good man, often active in workplace reality shows and popular online, shattered completely. Rumors said that Mark didn't even dare pick up his phone during those days, surrounded as he was by public condemnation. More revelations surfaced, a chaotic mix of information, making it hard to discern truth from falsehood, until the official police announcement finally cleared my name, while Mark became a wanted man. Such an announcement was more convincing than anything else. The interviewers who had previously rejected me all reached out again, offering jobs. but I turned them all down, even the offers from Chloe's family company. I had no intention of going back to that life. I received a call from my hometown. My old school's principal, a man as admirable and kind as Sophie's mother had been, asked if I'd consider coming back to teach and support the local education development. So I agreed. I visited Chloe's house one last time. This time nothing could stop me from leaving. I hadn't taken all my belongings with me when I first left, thinking the room I stayed in would be covered in dust by now. But as I opened the door, it was spotless and bright. Sunlight streamed in, casting a warm glow on freshly arranged flowers on the small table. I packed my remaining things quickly and hesitated for a moment before opening a drawer. I retrieved a photograph from an obscure compartment within it. It was an old photo, taken with an old camera, capturing a girl full of spirit. The evening breeze was brushing her hair back. She was fooling around with friends, turning back slightly, as if checking if someone was following behind her. That was Sophie, when I was 17. A photo I had taken secretly back then. At the time, I thought no one could truly grasp the fleeting midsummer winds, but perhaps I could capture a moment of it in a photograph. I left that photo on the table. Whether Sophie eventually picked it up or tossed it in the trash, that would be her choice. The jacaranda tree in the yard was blooming again, its purple blossoms hanging gracefully. I stood there for a moment, appreciating its beauty, when Sophie called my name softly from behind me. Liam? It was as if she was afraid to break a dream. I turned around and smiled at her calmly. Sophie's eyes were bruised and tired-looking. The usual arrogance was finally, completely wiped away. As the heiress of the Albright family, I'd never seen her look so cautious, almost humble. Her eyelashes fluttered as she spoke in a hoarse voice. When I began recovering, she started. I started investigating the car crash case. I kept digging until I found information that seemed to connect it to you. Then I couldn't go on. The thought of you betraying us made it hard to breathe. I'd never considered you could betray us. This thought just kept growing, uncontrollably. Ironically, I wished I had died in that car crash back then. Then I couldn't control myself, and I did what I did. I was wrong. Even that grand proposal. It was for your eyes, Liam. She talked a lot about her internal struggles and her reasoning, but I just looked at her, my expression clear and steady, and interrupted softly. No. Sophie froze. I smiled faintly, my lips pressed tightly together for a moment. Actually, I said, when you did it, you already knew you were wrong, but you thought it was okay. You were indifferent. Whether I was misunderstood or had truly betrayed you, you figured that no matter what you did, I'd forgive you. The truth was, I always knew that if Sophie hadn't been paralyzed and abandoned by those around her, she wouldn't have ever truly noticed me. Her attention would always have been on boys like Mark. Even the ring she gave me back then, the one I threw away, it didn't even fit properly. She remained silent for a long, long time. I thought it was the shadow of fallen jacaranda blossoms on the ground, but then I realized it was Sophie's tears falling. She reached out and grabbed my wrist, pleading, "I was a fool, Liam. Can you forgive me? Just one last time?" The dappled shadows from the jacaranda trees took me back to when I was 17, when Sophie had leaned against the railing and asked, "Liam, do you like me?" But now, after thinking it all over, I gently pried her hand away from my wrist. "I won't forgive you," I said. She saw the faint, gray-brown scar on my wrist, the one from that desperate night. Her eyes widened, her lips trembled, but she couldn't say a word. I spoke patiently, like comforting a child. "Sophie, your life was saved in that car accident by your mother. You need to live well. The company is her legacy, and you have to protect it." I paused. I'm leaving this place." Sophie's face turned impossibly pale. All the color drained away. At that moment, she must have felt a deep hollow in her heart. Someone she always thought would be there, no matter what, was truly gone for good. The midsummer breeze, once it passes, never really returns. Recently, the tides had definitely changed in City A. What was once called the proposal of the century, featuring Sophie and Mark, had now turned them into infamous figures, a bad girl and a bad guy. Mark's misdeeds and Sophie's perceived complicity, or at least her poor judgment, had caused the company's stocks to plummet. Then, for some reason, Sophie was in another car crash. She broke her leg and was now reportedly wheelchair-bound again. On the bus heading back to my county, I got a message from Sophie. It said, "I'll repay all that I owe you." I casually blocked her number. I turned my head to look at the passing scenery. The bus swayed gently, just like it did when I first arrived in the city all those years ago. Reflected in the window was the person sitting beside me, Chloe. She seemed to like sleeping. She was leaning back with her eyes closed now. Even though she was a CEO, Chloe had insisted on personally donating a batch of school supplies to my old school and taking the bus with me to oversee the delivery. I couldn't really stop her, so I had let her come along. As the bus swayed again, Chloe's head rested gently on my shoulder, but she still didn't wake up. I smiled a bit, pressing my lips together, and looked forward. The scenery continued to change along the way, but I was certain of one thing: I was heading into countless midsummers of my own.